movement of activism and organizing, and I kind of had the resources to be able to humble myself and say this is what it is and have the community nurture me. But lots of people in the community don't have that resource. So then how do you say to them, how do you say to them, let's mobilize, the slumlord to put a $25,000 green roof and, talk about carbon offset? For a lot of them, it's not something that they can really wrap their minds around. And so the dialogue that's been created is, how do we work with people that are like yourselves, who are sitting in this room, who have an inherent interest in sustainability, but not just in sustainability, but how do we bring that back to those who have suffered the most at the hands of, environmental justice, right? Because the whole movement is sort of going over. There are certain people's heads that it's going over. Yes, everyone's getting really involved and everyone's talking about green, but there are whole communities in this country that just are not on board with that yet. And this is one of the reasons that you have these communities that have facilitated environmental injustice, right? We talk about these more broader things like climate control, lack of resources, energy, land use, right? These are the communities like the South Bronx, which is sort of the litmus test for when environmental racism just goes bonkers. These are the communities where that type of broader issue is being facilitated, right? We're ground zero when you're talking about climate change, because we have all those facilities and all of those power plants and all those things that are helping to facilitate that. So then how do you tie it into folks and make them realize that this is not just about sustainability, which is viewed oftentimes as a privilege of affluent white people? How do you have people realize that you need to be leading the charge on this, because we're the ones who suffer the most? You've got to bring it in a way that is attainable. You've got to bring it in a way that is accessible. You have to bring it in a way that is cost effective. That's very important, right? There was this thing where Sustainable South Bronx was doing a light bulb drive with the CFL lights. And you think it's easy enough. But I had people say, I'm not spending $8 on a light bulb. And that was very valid. But when we started saying that if you buy these light bulbs, they last about 4 years and you will save something like 40% on your Con Edison bill, people were dedicating half of a paycheck to switching out every light in their house to these light bulbs. Because in the long run, they knew that they were actually going to save money. You were relating in a way that was talking about something that affected them on a day-to-day basis. Right? I remember when CFL light bulbs first came around, I wasn't really as environmentally conscious as I am now. And that's when they were like $12. I was like, I don't know, $12 is a lot for one light bulb, and I'm gonna have to change it in a couple weeks. And then once I started to read up about it, when I started finding out what they were, and then I actually got my first Con Ed bill, and it actually decreased by $80-something. I don't think I've used a regular light bulb in probably 2.5 years. And so these are the ways that we have to make connections. When we're thinking about designing things, packaging, how do we connect it to that real experience of the people that are happening in this community, right? There are those who, for the greater good, are willing to pay more money for something because they know in the long run that it's going to benefit them. But how do we offset it for those who have suffered the most and who can't afford that luxury? And so that's one of the things Sustainable South Bronx has been doing. We've been at the forefront of trying to drive legislation, drive policy, craft platforms that talk about making these allowances, creating these subsidies, so that, like, we've got our first green building that was done by a group called WEDCO, which is a non-for-profit group that deals specifically with women in underserved neighborhoods. And they created what they called the WEDCO Green Building. That's actually, they call it the Intervale and Lewis 9 building, because it's on Intervale Avenue and Lewis 9 Boulevard. And it is a completely green building. Solar paneling, retrofit, green roof, Wi-Fi for every resident. Well, they were able to do this with the tax abatements that have come from the green roofs, with the initiatives that are happening to give subsidies to builders who are willing to do energy retrofits. It would not have been possible otherwise. And these buildings are affordable buildings. That means that they're going to go by the income of the people who live in the community, so that something that is necessary is not passed on to the consumer, because these are the consumers who just can't afford it otherwise. And they would gladly, it's about making those concessions. They would gladly put themselves in danger, or not gladly, but they would willingly put themselves in danger or continue to do something that they know may not be the best because it's cost effective. It's what they can afford right now. And so that's some of the things that we've that we deal with on a day-to-day basis when talking about sustainability. Like, how do we make that connection? And I think as we go forward, the way in which that we're really going to be successful in bringing sustainability to EJ communities is making sure that we not make those connections with the people, that we do it in a way that's not condescending, that we do it in a way that's not pushing our values on other ones, that we make sure that when we come into these neighborhoods and these communities, that we take into context the real socioeconomic and ethnic and racial constructs that exist there, right, in a historical and a contemporary standpoint, that we are passionate and diligent, because as an organizer, I take more knocks than victories, and it's a constant struggle to get up every day to continue to do this work. And it's also very easy to make it seem like, well, these people don't want it. These people, these people, these people. But you have to start to realize that a lot of it is about accessibility and about what you know. When you have a community that it has no access to their waterfront, that has lack of green spaces, you start talking about mental disconnect, you start talking about subjugation, and you have to really start thinking about the psychology of the problem before you can even get to actually solving the problem. That's imperative in order to do the work. And then you have to start to seek out the strategic alliances that are going to help you do this work, because I can no more do it as an organizer alone than you'll be able to do it as design students alone. A lot of the things that I'm talking about right now are really sort of social justice issues, and you're probably thinking as like design students, how the hell am I supposed to tackle things like the proliferation of drugs in the South Bronx? But in terms of when thinking about these types of things, you may not be able to tackle it, but if you've gotten savvy at seeking like minds that are already steeped in this social justice issue, who will give you guidance on doing these types of things and the things that are relevant, so that you're not getting materials in which the overhead is so high that you've got to pass it on to consumer and it becomes counterproductive, you don't even get to accomplish what you want to anyway, what's the point? It's a moot point, and environmentalism will continue to have the reputation that it's only for hippie, rich white people. I'm being very candid. This is what I'm told when I go out in the community every day. When I started a yoga class, I was told, that's some white people shit. I don't want to take no yoga. What yoga gonna teach me? I don't want to do no yoga. You know, but if I said I was giving away Jordans, there'd be a line around the block, because this is the type of mentality that's been nurtured, right? This overly consumeristic mentality that validates people who really don't have a lot. But if I've got on the best Jordans on the block, then I'm about something, even though I may live in the worst slummy building, right? Because somewhere along those lines, we haven't taken ourselves out of that. We don't think that we're going to be able to get more. So the more that we proliferate and things that are generally very unsustainable, right? Talking about Jordans, the more that I can validate my self-worth, because that's missing. So those are the types of things that we think about. And Mothers on the Sustainable South Bronx really does that through you know, through advocacy, through making sure that they empower people not to be just reactive, but proactive, right? Don't wait till the things just pop up in your community to say that you don't want them there. Start feeling empowered to making sure that you are actually involved, calling for a transparent process that you can say what it is that you want. And a lot of that is done through, you know, going out in the community and getting strategic feedback. A lot of it is done through advocacy and policy, but a lot of it also is done through the fact that what makes Sustainable South Bronx unique is that they have thought of innovative and creative ways to remedy a lot of these issues, right? How can I care about tree pits if I can't pay my bills, if I'm underemployed, or if I'm unemployed? It was with that thought, right, that Majora Carter thought of the BEST program. And she could only get that from being a community resident, right? She understood that being one of 13 children who grew up in the Hunts Point area in a working class family who had a brother who was gunned down due to violence in the area, she understood that there are going to be some barriers that are going to stop people from even reaching that far, to getting to that level. So how do we talk about sustainability while also thinking about creating pathways out of poverty? And so before the term green collar job or green collar economy ever started flying around, she created the BEST program. And that is the Bronx Environmental Stewardship Training Program. That is a 14-week program that is free to anybody in the New York City area